chocolate, coffee, Mayan history, and impressive volcanoes and wildlife all come together in the wonderful country of Guatemala. You'll learn more about Guatemala and improve your listening in this episode of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm feeling quite energetic because I've just had a coffee. I wonder if it was from Guatemala.
Well, was it a good coffee?
It was a really good coffee.
Then it's very possibly from Guatemala because that's one of the things they do really well. Before we go into wonderful things about Guatemala and look at this beautiful country, we have an audio message from our friend Alberto from Australia.
G'day, mate.
Hi, Reza and Craig. It's Alberto from Australia. It has been a long time since I haven't contacted you guys. I was meant to leave a message after we came back from Madrid during last Christmas holidays, but life has been really busy. The chocolate I sent you is from the shop that I work. My wife and I tried a few months ago and we really enjoyed it, so I thought it could be a nice present. I just listened to your last episode 312, Beyond the English Language, where Carlos, a Brazilian guy who lives as well in Australia, mentioned he heard about 100 different podcasts until he found yours. Well, this is a message not only to him, but also to anyone who wants to listen Australian accent. I highly recommend Conversations with Richard Findler. He has a podcast about stories mostly from Aussie people. So he doesn't teach English, but it's good for improving the listening. That's all for now. Keep cheering English students, guys. Thanks for all, folks. See you soon.
Good day, Alberto. Thank you very much for your message, mate. We're pleased to hear from you, as always.
Yeah, nice one, sport. Thanks as ever, Alberto. And as we said before, that chocolate was amazing, by the way. Really good chocolate. That was a very good voice message. Totally clear, 100%. But, here comes the but, there's a couple of things we just wanted to mention, Alberto.
Yeah, you said in the beginning, it's been a long time since I haven't contacted you guys. You wouldn't use the negative haven't in that sentence, you'd use the positive. So better to say, Alberto, it's been a long time since I have contacted you. Not since I haven't, since I have contacted you. How does that translate to Spanish, Reza? Is it the negative in Spanish?
I think so. In Spanish, I think you can say, hace mucho tiempo que no os he contactado. Yeah, that's why you're translating it from Spanish.
So, yeah, Alberto made a direct translation and also translated the negative, which is not correct. So it's been a long time since we have heard from you, Alberto. Any other points that we can help Alberto with?
Yes, an old friend of ours. When I say friend, I mean something that pops up, something that appears a lot. Listened to. You forgot the to. You said, I just listened your last episode. Because again, in Spanish, you may be thinking, escuché el último episodio. Escuché. But in English, we have to add to when there's an object. So I just listened to your last episode.
And thank you very much for your recommendations for people wanting to hear an Aussie accent, as you said, an Aussie accent, which is an Australian accent. And there's a link in the show notes. Go to inglespodcast.com/318. We've linked to those conversations with Richard Fidler, Fidler. And I did listen to one or two. They're very, very good. So we definitely recommend those for listening practice. in a similar way to recently someone recommended conversations on the BBC podcasts. They also have different accents from around the UK where you can hear different accents and get your ears accustomed to and adjusted to different ways of speaking. So go and listen to some Australian English over at Richard Fiddler. Very good recommendation. Alberto also sent us an email update on the COVID-19 crisis in Australia. Would you like to read it, Reza?
The COVID situation is really relaxed here in Australia. When I speak with my family and friends in Spain, it feels like it is something a bit insecure and scary. But maybe because people here live spread out. Spread out is separado, dispersado, right? Maybe because Aussie people don't kiss or hug as much as Spaniards, or maybe because we've been so lucky.
Yeah, thanks for the update. Thank you very much, Alberto. And it has been a bit insecure and scary, especially in the beginning over here in Spain. And I am definitely not kissing and hugging people. Normally when Reza comes to the flat to record these podcasts, we shake hands. Maybe I give him a hug because he's a very close friend. But today we just touched elbows because it's just the new normal, isn't it? It's the new way of being in physical proximity to people, and we're adjusting to this new space issue.
And the very first thing I did when I got to Craig's house was wash my hands. Immediately wash my hands.
Was that a reflection of me or
No, for your good above all, but partly mine. And I came in the metro, and by the way, as soon as I got off the metro, I put hand sanitizer on my hands. And then as soon as I got to Craig's house, I washed my hands. So you can see we're taking it really, really seriously.
And I'm definitely more aware of what I touch outside my home, outside my flat. To be aware of something is ser consciente. So I'm aware of touching public things on buses and shops and in the street. Anywhere I go outside, I'm very aware of what I come into physical contact with. I think that's a good thing.
Do you know what? You got to look on the bright side of everything. And if, as a result of all this, people who weren't so careful before about hygiene are more careful, well, that'll be a good thing. People who didn't really think much about, is this surface clean? Are my hands clean before I handle food and that type of thing? Maybe it's a good thing if this experience sticks with them and they're always really conscious about it.
And maybe you're thinking, well, what am I going to do now when I go back to my English classes and I'm going to be in close proximity with my classmates, with my teacher, touching desks and being in a room with other people? Well, until you feel comfortable doing that, we do have a solution for you that you can study English online, staying at home, using Skype with your computer. Reza, would you like to explain how italki works, our sponsor?
Yes, as Craig said, all you need is Skype or something similar to that, some kind of online platform with video and audio. And how italki works is you have a look at their website and you'll see that they can put you in touch with a very wide range of teachers online. Now, Alberto, he obviously is living in Australia, so he'll be interested in Australian English. Well, imagine you want an Australian teacher. There are Australian teachers on italki. There's Americans, there's Canadians, there's Irish people. There's all sorts of people. You can check out their profile. So you find out where they come from. So maybe you'll find out about their accent. Also, how much they charge, because depending on experience, qualifications, that type of thing, different teachers charge different rates. You can also find out when they're free. Availability. If you live in Australia, 8 o'clock in the morning does not mean the same as 8 o'clock in the morning in Spain. Remember, they're down under, so different times. You might want very particular timetables. Well, have a look and see who's free at the time that you want. So basically, you pick and choose who, where, when, why, how, everything on italki. And what's more, we can guarantee 100% that you will not get COVID using italki because you don't have to leave your house. So why not give it a go now? In fact, if you sign up through our link and buy your first classes, italki will even give you a $10 credit to get you started. So give it a go today.
That's right. Just one thing, though, if you do decide to choose an Australian teacher for your classes, you must remember to turn your computer upside down because your teacher will be standing on his or her head when they connect on Skype. And Reza and I would like to thank italki very much for sponsoring Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Okay, let's leave away down under now and let's head up towards the equator. So neither the northern nor the southern hemisphere, but we're kind of near the equator. I don't know exactly north or south, but I know that Guatemala is very near the equator. Do you know, is it north or south of the equator? It's a bit north, isn't it? Probably.
Well, we'll look into the geography in a minute or two because we're going to tell you exactly where Guatemala is and which countries are neighbors of Guatemala. But we want to say thank you to Lisette from Guatemala who sent us this email, and this is the reason we're speaking about Guatemala today. Lisette wrote and said, I've noticed that you like to podcast about countries, so I would love to hear you guys talking about my country, Guatemala. Thanks so much for all your knowledge that you share with us in every episode. Have a wonderful Sunday. From Lisette.
Lisette, you must be a mind reader because it is Sunday. How did you know we were going to record this on a Sunday? You just got lucky.
Telepathic. So Guatemala, the Republic of Guatemala is bordered by Mexico to the north and west. So Mexico's to the north and west of the country, and Belize and the Caribbean is to the northeast. Honduras lies to the east, and El Salvador is in the southeast. And in the south of the country, you have the Pacific Ocean.
Craig, a bit of trivia for you. Belize is one of the countries that borders Honduras. Here's a kind of pub quiz type question for somebody who's obsessed with geography like me. What's the old name for Belize? What did it used to be known as?
I'm searching the cobwebs of my brain. I can't remember. Tell us.
Well, Belize used to be called British Honduras.
I was thinking British Honduras. I was. I didn't say it because I didn't want to look like a fool, but yeah, that makes sense.
Honduras. So there's a country which borders Guatemala where the official language is not Spanish, is English. In Belize, the main official language is English, and it's right beside Guatemala. How curious.
That's interesting. So how many people live in Guatemala? Well, the estimated population, and this is from back in 2018, just over 17 million. That's 17 million, the estimated population of Guatemala. And the capital is Guatemala City.
Another one of my adolescent obsessions, which have stayed with me, is with flags. So geography, borders, capital cities, and flags.
Can I share with the listeners what happened because we write the show notes together on Google Docs. So I started preparing something for this episode, and when I got to the flag section, knowing that Reza likes flags very much, and it used to be a hobby when he was younger to know the flags in detail, I wrote Guatemala flag, white and blue, full stop. And then I passed the document to Reza, knowing that that would not be enough for Reza. Reza would need more details about the flag, more explanation. What's the history? What's on the flag? Why is it on the flag? So Reza, over to you.
Well, the only thing I guessed right before I looked was it would be blue and white, because many countries in that area have blue and white. The rest, thanks to internet, I found out. So here's what I found out. The current flag, because it used to be different, The current flag of Guatemala is a blue, white, blue vertically striped tricolor. So tricolor, 3 colors, blue, white, blue, vertical. But it used to be horizontally striped. It changed. Why was it horizontally striped? To simulate the flag of then newly independent Argentina. So many of you probably can picture the Argentinian flag, yeah? So many countries back in the 19th century copied, more or less, the Argentinian flag.
Did Argentina have some kind of control over the country, or?
No, it wasn't that. It was just because Argentina had become newly independent from Spain. They were one of the first to do it. And so the other countries, when they became independent, kind of looked to Argentina for inspiration.
So they look at their flag, we'll do something similar.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
And they basically copied it. So the Argentinian flag's blue, white, blue, horizontal. So that's how the Guatemalan flag started off. But later they changed it to vertical. And it's not the only flag in the region which has the blue, white, blue. Why blue, white, blue? Well, in the case of Guatemala, it has the added symbolism of the blue sections representing the 2 oceans. So Guatemala, as Craig explained, is in that thin part of Central America. So you've got the Pacific, the Pacific on one side, and the Atlantic, or really, I guess it's the Caribbean.
Caribbean.
Yeah? But it opens up later into the Atlantic on either side. Another thing I did not know at all, but I found out on the internet, is that the Quetzal bird, I think it's pronounced that, Quetzal or Quetzal bird, is on the coat of arms in the middle. We'll talk more about that bird in a minute.
What's the coat of arms for people who don't know?
Coat of arms is like insignia, which I think is also basically a Spanish word, the insignia of a country, the coat of arms. So you've got this Quetzal bird in the middle, and there's a scroll. That's Scroll. Think of the part ROLL, roll. So a scroll is a roll of paper with something important written on it. What's written on it? Well, a date. The 15th of September, 1821. An important date if you're a Guatemalan, because it's Independence Day from Spain. So that's written on the scroll, which is along with the Quetzal bird. And there are 2 crossed rifles, guns, yeah? Why? Well, they represent the defense of the fatherland. The idea that now we're independent and we'll fight if we have to defend our independence. There's also a laurel crown for victory. Laurel from ancient times has symbolized victory, I suppose, over the Spanish. Sorry for Spanish listeners, but that's history. And then the final part is cross or crossed. Sometimes we say with ED, sometimes not. Crossed swords or crossed swords. And that represents the honor of the nation, apparently.
And swords or espadas.
Espadas, yeah. So you'll find all of that in the coat of arms in the middle of the Guatemalan flag, which is blue, white, blue.
One thing I've noticed, next year, they'll be celebrating the 200th anniversary of independence, 1821, 2021. So big celebrations, Guatemala next year, 200 years of independence.
Although, you know what? It was a little bit more complicated than that. Let's not give the Spanish a bad press. Oh, the terrible conquistadors invading everyone. The Mexicans...
Not like the English who never invaded anywhere.
Oh, no, goodness no.
We just kept to our island forever.
So no,
invade anywhere.
Well, we've all been a bit bad in our histories. All countries we've invaded bits and bobs, or tribes have invaded other tribes. So the Spanish left only for the Mexicans to arrive. So actually, Guatemala was briefly ruled by the Mexicans from 1821 to 23. But
just 2 years.
Just a couple of years, yeah. They controlled most of those Central American countries, but then eventually they got rid of the Mexicans and they united as a federation. They called themselves the Central American provinces. So all the countries that Craig mentioned on the border, they became like one federation, but eventually they split up into independent countries.
Spanish, of course, is the official language of Guatemala, and it's spoken by about 90% of the population. although there are many other indigenous languages. And I'm going at this point to bow to my friend Reza, who's much better at pronouncing things than I am. So to bow is what the Japanese do. Which is a sign of respect to my colleague here, who's going to pronounce the words that he's written of other indigenous languages. And here are some of them that you can find in Guatemala. Take it away, Reza.
Well, thanks very much, Craig. He's bowing to me, but he says, but I think what he's really doing is passing the buck. To pass the buck, B-U-C-K, means when you've got a problem, give it to somebody else to get rid of it, because, let's be honest, neither Craig nor I really know how to pronounce these words because they're not Spanish. I'll try. You can see them in the show notes. So languages which aren't Spanish. Quiche, or something like that. I apologize to Guatemalans.
Quiche looks good
listening.
to me.
Yeah, very, very sorry if I mispronounce it. Kakchikel, Mam, Pokomchi, Tsutuchil. You see, he passed the buck, eh? He was getting rid of the problem. Jakaltek, Kanjobal, Achi, Akaltek, Sipapakense, among others. So there are many languages spoken by different tribes or subdivisions of tribes in Guatemala.
Fantastic. I think you definitely deserve that round of applause for your excellent attempt at pronunciation of those words. The name Guatemala actually translates in the Mayan language into land of trees, which I didn't know, so that's another thing I've learned from doing research for this podcast. Land of trees is Mayan for Guatemala. No, Guatemala is Mayan for land of trees, I should say.
If you remember, I mentioned earlier this bird called the quetzal on the coat of arms. Well, not only is it the national bird, but it's also the name of the currency, the money of Guatemala. It's called the quetzal.
And the Mayan people worship the cocoa tree, and chocolate is the food of the gods. Now, that's one thing the Maya people and myself have in common. I also worship the cocoa tree, and every day I sacrifice my figure to the wonders of the cocoa plant by eating a small piece of chocolate. There are nearly 10,000 cocoa farms in Guatemala, and curiously, the first chocolate bar was made there.
Yes, I don't know if Craig realizes, but I think I've seen Craig once or twice having a nice coffee, possibly Guatemalan, and then having some chocolate, you know, his strong, dark, 95% cocoa or cacao chocolate, and he kind of goes into a trance. He goes into a trance because of such pleasure. And I think I've heard him speak Sipapakense when he was like in a trance. Or maybe it was Akalatek. I'm not sure. But I'm convinced he has a connection with the Guatemalan Mayan gods somehow.
Yeah, and you know, in Buddhism, there are the two figures, the two images of the Buddha. There's the Indian Buddha, who's very slim, Siddhartha Buddha, who's very slim and very fine and very aesthetic. And then there's the Japanese Buddha, who's fat and cheerful and laughing. Well, that is that is my image of the Mayan god that I sacrifice my chocolate to every day. The big fat Buddha sitting there with lots of rolls of fat eating chocolate. That's me.
So Craig would feel totally at home in Guatemala with all the reverence they have for chocolate. He would be like a fish in water. Another thing about Guatemala is its volcanoes. For such a small country, it's surprising to know that there are 30 volcanoes. There's a very famous one, which I'm about to pronounce badly, I think again, called either Tajumulco or Tajumulco, and that is 4,202 meters, the highest peak in all of Central America.
That's high, eh?
That's very high. Really high, isn't it?
Yeah.
But don't worry, only 3 of those 30 volcanoes are active. Fuego, that's a A pretty good name for a volcano, isn't it? Fire. Fuego, Pacaya, and Santiaguito are the three active volcanoes in Guatemala. So don't go too near them if you see smoke coming out.
There was a civil war in Guatemala from 1960 to 1996. The war lasted for 36 years, a civil war, and it was the longest in Latin American history. And sadly, during the war, it's estimated that 200,000 people were killed during that civil war that started in the 60s.
Craig's already mentioned the ancient and very important Mayan civilization, and you can see Mayan ruins, so what's left of their architecture. Above all, a very famous place worth seeing in the middle of the jungle is the Tikal National Park. So it's jungle now, but in the middle of all that, you'll find very impressive Mayan ruins.
It's a country I'd love to visit. It sounds very interesting, lots of history. And another reason to go, of course, and I found this out when I was doing research. These three things jumped out at me. 3 great Guatemalan dishes to try, some lovely food. One's called caquic, I think. It's a soup, a Mayan soup that has turkey, coriander and chili. That sounds lovely. And another one, chiles rellenos, stuffed chilies. They are sweet peppers that are stuffed with rice, meat, cheese and herbs. They also sound lovely. And finally, chicken pepian, which sounds wonderful. It's chicken and spicy pumpkin, calabaza, spicy pumpkin smothered in sesame sauce. Now, sesame sauce is something I love. And if you smother something, you cover it completely. So the sauce completely covers the chicken. That sounds delicious.
Sesame sauce, that sounds similar to that Middle Eastern thing which I really like, tahina.
Yes.
Which they put in baba ganoush and things like that. That sounds really good.
Have you tried any of these dishes?
I've never eaten Guatemalan food in my life. I'd love to.
Do you think there's a Guatemalan restaurant in Valencia? I've never seen one.
I don't think there is. Do you know what? I've never even met a Guatemalan person, as far as I know. And here we are in Spain, and I've never met one. Have you ever had a conversation with a Guatemalan?
Not that I can remember. If you're listening and you live in the Valencia area, or if you know of a Guatemalan restaurant that we could go to and try until we can physically get to Guatemala, please let us know, because I think Reza and I would really enjoy tasting some of these lovely Guatemalan dishes. Speaking of food and drink, coffee's popular, isn't it, Reza?
Yes, and Guatemala is certainly the place to go. It's its biggest export. So the word export can be a noun or a verb, to export or an export. So coffee is a very important export for Guatemalans. The economy depends on it. Speaking of food, of course, chocolate we mentioned earlier. I have tried Guatemalan chocolate as well as Guatemalan coffee. It's very, very good. You can find that in some supermarkets in Spain. It's a bit more expensive than your average chocolate, but I think it's worth it.
I think I've tried it as well, yeah. And I think there's a French make of chocolate that buys cocoa from Guatemala and they sell it under their brand, but it's Guatemalan cocoa that's in the chocolate. It's very, very good. The 1st of November is All Saints' Day, the Day of the Dead, in which many countries around the world honour their dead. And what's interesting about Guatemala is the way they honour their dead is to fly kites, cometas. They fly kites in the air to honour their dead. So when you go to cemeteries, that's where people are buried, you walk around the graves and the headstones. You can also see kites being flown by people who are honouring the dead.
Craig, sorry, you mentioned the word headstone. What is a headstone?
Well, it's sometimes made out of stone, sometimes it's made out of marble, and it usually has the name of the person who is buried in the grave. Grave is tumba. And also the dates that they lived and maybe some expression about their life. So it's a commemoration of the person's life and also to let people know who is in the ground, who is buried in this place. This kite flying ritual dates back more than 3,000 years, so it's very much ingrained, which means very much inside the Guatemalan culture. And one thing I remembered when I read this was that it's quite popular in India. I don't think in India or maybe Pakistan they use kite flying in the same way, in the same connection with people who are dead, but I do remember it being very, very popular in India.
Yes, Indians love competitions with kites, so they quite often have kite fights. They kind of attack each other, in a friendly way with kites in the air. It's almost like the national sport,
Do they do it on a particular day, or is it all through the year?
No, all through the year.
Okay.
They love kites, and they even fight with kites. But I don't think they use it to celebrate the dead, as far as I know.
But it's interesting because there's that kind of connection maybe of you being on the ground and you flying something up very high in the heavens, perhaps somewhere not on earth, where you hope you're going to connect with the spirit of the person who is no longer on earth with you. So I like that idea. I like that idea very much. Well, now it's your turn to practice your English. We hope you found this podcast useful. If you'd like to send us a voice message and tell us where you're from and what your name is and perhaps what you'd like to hear in a future episode, Reza, how can people send us voice messages?
You can send your voice message by using speakpipe.com/English podcast. Remember, though, there's a time limit, and once or twice people have got cut off in the middle of a sentence. I think it's 90 seconds, isn't it? A minute and a half. But that should be enough, to get your message in that 90 seconds.
If it's not, just record 2 messages and I can edit them together. Another possibility, record an MP3 file separately and just attach it to an email. That also works.
Speaking of emails, Craig, what if they want to just send written feedback? Where can listeners contact us?
Easy. To me, Craig, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, and Reza's address is belfastreza, Reza, at gmail.com. There are also courses that you can buy to improve your English. Go to store.mentioningles.net for more information.
As ever, we'd like to thank all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast on Patreon. And if you want to see a list of all our helpers, all our supporters on Patreon, if you go to patreon.com/English podcast, you can. We haven't got time in each episode to mention everybody, but what we do is mention our most recent, our new Patreon sponsors, who are
Ana Giovanna, Julia Gamboa, Ana G. Cortez T, and Juan Tenzin Gyatso. Thank you very much for supporting the podcast, and thanks to all of you who are our Patreon sponsors. And if you want to, you can join them for as little as $1 per month. And you get instant access to recent transcriptions. If you would like to be a part of the Patreon scheme, go to Patreon, patreon.com/English podcast.
Craig. What's on next week's episode?
On next week's episode, we'll be speaking about the present perfect, the past simple, and gerunds and infinitives. So a little bit of tenses, verb tenses, grammar, that kind of thing next week, and answering your questions. Until next week, thank you very much for listening to us this week. We'll see you soon. Goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.